Blog Talk Radio.
Mi chiamo Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut, ne ye AKANFO NANASOM, da me dinde ODWIRAFO, Kwesi, Nehem, Ptah, Akhan, Akwamuman, Amaruka, Atifi, ODWIRAFo. That means greetings to all Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, people meaning Africans, black people. Today is ANCEstral NANASOM Day, ancient, authentic Akhan Ancestral Religion Day. My name is Odwirafo, Kwesi, Nehem, Ptah, Akhan, Odwirafo of the Akwamu Nation in North America. Yet I say we thank you for tuning in to the show once again. We're going to place some links in the chat room right now dealing with the information that we're going to be covering. If you are on the phone line and you have a question or a comment, just hit the number 1 so that we can see that your hand is raised. If you are in the chat room and you want to interact in the chat room, you must log in with a username. If you don't have a username, you can sign up for one quickly in Blog Talk. For the individuals who are new to the broadcast, we have 3 broadcasts on a weekly basis. Of course, on Joda Mondays, we have ANCEstral NANASOM, ancient, authentic Akhan Ancestral Religion, which we're going to get into detail about tonight, of course. On Benada or Abenada Tuesdays, we have Ojira, which means purification. We deal with Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, ancestral religion, African ancestral religion in general, showing how it impacts every aspect of our lives. We talk about ANCEstral NANASOM, the Akhan expression of ancestral religion, on Monday nights, but on Tuesday nights we deal with ancestral religion in general, how it impacts every aspect of our lives, our thoughts, intentions, and actions. We deal with texts from ancient Kemet. We bring clarity to those ancient texts. We bring clarity or purification, jira, to cosmology, to philosophy, the understanding of our culture because of the misinformation that has been propagated and continues to be propagated not only by the whites and their offspring, our absolute enemies, but also individuals in the Western Hemisphere, as well as individuals on the continent of Afuraitkaitnut who have been infected with pseudo-religion such as Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Hebrewism, Hinduism, Taoism, Buddhism, pseudo-metaphysics, and so forth, all kinds of misinformation, and therefore they have been infected with white culture, and those infections show up in their misrepresentation of ancestral culture, ancestral religion, ancestral cosmology. And therefore, when we receive that misinformation, we attempt to incorporate it, and we create disorder within ourselves. So we clarify these concepts, clarify cosmology, clarify the nature and function of the supreme being, the great mother and great father, the divinities, the forces in nature, the ancestresses and ancestors of our blood circles, and how they impact every aspect of our lives. So that's what we deal with on Benada or Abenada, which is Tuesdays, for Ojira. On Awukuda or Akuada, which is Wednesday, we have Egwa Marketplace Day. And we bring individuals and groups onto the show. We talk about their businesses, organizations, and institutions that are, number 1, serving the Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnut, African Black community in a positive capacity, and number 2, how their ancestral religious values inform their service to the community. Individuals who are serving the community, but also being empowered and guided by their ancestral religious values in their service to us through their businesses, organizations, and institutions. So we've had a number of individuals come on, sharing with us for 2 hours, sitting with us for a couple of hours through the broadcast, interview, talking about their businesses, how they were founded, what kind of services and products they have, how they're impacting the community and so forth, taking questions from the listening audience and so forth. So we've had a number of individuals come on, and we're going to have more individuals coming on a regular basis. In that vein, we have published the OKRA Economic Development Model. When you go to our OKRA Economic Development model page on our website, you will see the publication, OKRA Economic Development Model, Model of Economic Development Rooted in Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, or African Ancestral Religious Values. So we published the model. You can download it for free. And then we also have a 4-part series that we did on Blog Talk where we dissect the model, going into detail about various aspects of the model and their applications and the ramifications for employing this model in the community and so forth. So you can listen to those 4 broadcasts. And we have 2 other broadcasts as well on that page, the Egwakundi Economic Warfare broadcast, as well as the Nokwarifo Ne Amamre Self-Employment and Ancestral Culture broadcast. So you can get all of those downloads from that page, including the OKRA Economic Development Model itself. And then you'll also see on the page the list of businesses, organizations, and institutions. We are targeting one Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit business, organization, or institution per week for 52 weeks. We are doing so because part of our model is the strategy we use, which we say we starve the beast and feed the pride. That means we make an assessment on a weekly basis to determine what funds we would have potentially wasted spending with the whites and their offspring, and then we starve the beast and feed the pride. We take the funds we would have spent with the whites and their offspring, starve that white beast, and feed the pride, reallocate those funds to the business, organization, or institution of the week, either making a donation or accessing their products and or services. So instead of spending $5 at Starbucks or $5 at Walmart or $5 at McDonald's or $5 at CVS or something like that throughout the course of the week, acquiring products that are not good for your health, number one. So number two, wasting money with the whites and their offspring, you would take that $20, starve that white beast, and feed the pride. Make a donation to the business of the week or purchase products and services for the business of the week. If 1,000 of our people engage that process of starving the beast and feeding the pride through that reallocation of funds, we're not talking about a generation of new sources of revenue. We're talking about the same revenue that we actually spend. You're either going to spend it with our enemy or with our own people. We're either going to continue to expand the businesses of our enemies, or we're going to expand our own businesses and let their businesses collapse. We're either going to continue to give them nearly $1 trillion, or we're going to transfer that $1 trillion to our own businesses so that they can expand and so forth. So one person takes the $20 they would have wasted over the course of a week and reallocates it to the business of the week, then that business receives a $20 normally would not have received, taken directly from the whites and offspring. If 1,000 of our people do that, then that's $20,000 taken away from the whites and their offspring and reallocated to the business of the week. And therefore that black business can expand higher within the community, expand their services and products to us. It's a win-win situation. If we do not do so, then by default, we are funding our absolute enemies, the whites and their offspring, on a weekly basis, daily basis, weekly basis, and so forth. So when you go to the OKRA Economic Development page, you will see not only the OKRA Economic Development Model, you see that. You can download that for free, of course, 4-part series, plus the other 2 broadcasts dealing with the Economic Development Model. You'll also see the list of businesses. You'll see links directly to their website, so you can go directly to their website. But you'll also see the link to the broadcast of the interviews that they did with us on the show, so that you can download that 2-hour interview, listen to what they have to offer and so forth, and then you can go support that business. So again, of 1 business per week for 52 weeks, and that is for optimal capital infusion into 1 business per week. And then when we go to the next business, optimal capital infusion for that business. And as we move along, then the businesses in the previous weeks will receive donations and receive additional business that normally they had not received. Then they can also participate in supporting the business of the following week and the week after that and so forth. So it's a self-refueling process. So this is what we're doing. All right, so we have those couple of links up, and we're gonna put a couple of titles in the chat room right quick. So the OKRA Complex, The Soul of AKANFO is one of the publications that we'll deal with, and the OBARIMA Afurakani Manhood publication. So when you go to the NHOMA page, you'll get that information. So also before we get into that, we just launched an initiative this past Ptah, which is Friday, the OBARIMA Afurakani Manhood Training Initiative. Now, we published our book, OBARIMA Afurakani Manhood, African Manhood, back in 13,008, so-called 2008. We released that publication, ebook version, as well as the soft cover version. The ebook version of that book, as well as all of our 16 books that we have published to date, and of course we have more books coming out very soon, but we have published 16 books to date. One of them is OBARIMA Afurakani Manhood. The ebook version of that is a free download, just like the ebook version of all of our 16 books are free downloads. You can download them at any time directly from the NHOMA page on the website. We also have the soft cover version of our publications that we print in-house on our own printers in color. We do not contract that out. Everything we control in-house. So, and we print on demand. So we also have the soft cover version that we distribute as well. The soft cover versions of all of our books range between $8 and $11. And then if you order 10 books or more, like some people order the first 10 books of the set, or the whole 16-book set, any order of 10 books or more is 30% off automatic. But the ebook versions are free. So when we published the OBARIMA Afurakani Manhood book in 13,008, Gregorian calendar 2008, we've done workshops dealing with OBARIMA Afurakani Manhood from the young men, whether it's young teenagers all the way through adults as well. Coming to the workshops, everyone receives a soft cover version of the book free. Of course, the workshops are always free as well. So everybody, we go through the information in the book, those 7 principal values of manhood, and of course, everybody receives the book. So when they leave, they actually have that publication. We've gone through that publication, so they are very clear about what's going on. And that book is a manual. We recommend that every Afurakani man, young as well as old, has a copy of that book. That's one of the reasons, of course, we made the ebook version free. It's the full text for free as a download. Anyone who has a smartphone can download that book for free. So they can have that Afurakani Manhood manual in their possession. So what we have also done is we did a 2-part video series dissecting the book in detail, very similar to the way that we engage these workshops. And then we also did a broadcast on our Blog Talk Radio show where we went through the book in detail. The 2-part video series we did the year before last, and then the broadcast we did last year. So we're dissecting the book, going into detail, just very similar to the way that we would do if we were in a workshop. In that fashion, anyone who's not able to make it to a workshop, then they can go download the book for free. If they don't have any funds, they can download the book for free. Then they can go to that video series and they can listen just as if they were at a workshop, dissecting every aspect of the book, so they're very clear about these principles of manhood that they can incorporate in every aspect of their lives. The 7 principal values of manhood are connected to the abosom, the forces in nature that animate the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies that govern the 7-day week, as well as your chronobiological cycle called the circumception cycle, chronobiological cycle that causes shifts within your body physiologically every 7 days, which is in alignment with the 7-day week. So every single day of the week is governed by a different energy complex, and it affects us physiologically, our chronobiological cycle. It affects us hormonally. It affects us emotionally, mentally, intellectually, and spiritually. So every single day of the week, you can take advantage of the energy that governs that day and the principal value of manhood that's in alignment with that energy complex. The book is 7 sections based on those 7 principal values, based on those 7 energy complexes that govern our chronobiological cycle and the natural cycle of 7 days that governs all cycles in nature. So every single day is an opportunity to refine your character, refine your focus, refine your nature as an Afurakani, what's in the book. So individuals can get that information for free. We have the workshops, but we also instituted the No Kwadifo distributor option. So any Afurakani man, including Afuraitkaitnit women, with regard to the No Kwadifo distributor option, if you need to work, you would like to begin to work immediately, you can become a distributor of our soft-cover publication, and we have that program. So anyone who needs to begin to generate income or generate some additional income, you can do so through our distributor P. So all of that began a number of years ago. Even before we published the book, we were already teaching OBARIMA, the 7 principal values of manhood, when we were teaching drug prevention in Chicago and so forth for a number of years. Part of the section was the same workshop we do with the OBARIMA Afurakani Manhood book. Prior to publishing the book, we were already doing that for a number of years in various settings, schools, high schools, elementary schools, after-school programs with young men, young adults, and older individuals as well. And that's one of the reasons we published the book. Now, our initiative is we would like to expand what we have been doing over the past 7 years. So we started a GoFundMe campaign for OBARIMA. Any contribution that you make to the OBARIMA Afurakani Manhood Training Initiative of $15 or more will allow you to receive 1 or more of our soft cover books. You can choose from all 16. So it's not just a free donation. Any donation of $15 or more, you will receive 1 or more of our books. Just let us know which book or books you would like to receive in return for your donation. And yet I say we thank you for the individuals who have already donated once we launched this initiative on Ptah this past Friday. We'd like to reach millions of our young as well as older Afurakani men, get the soft cover version of the book into their hands, also introduce them to the No Kwadifo self-employment option. If you don't have a job, or even if you have a job, we should be self-employed on some level. Every Afurakani man should have something independent, so even if your job is phased out, you have the capacity to engage in entrepreneurial effort, entrepreneurial endeavor. We need to be engaged in that. That's just natural for us to do. So we want to expand the efforts that we have already been engaged in for the past 7 years. We've had thousands of people downloading the OBARIMA Afurakani Manhood book, of course, in this country, but Afurakani men around the world. Thousands of downloads. We constantly receive feedback that one read of the book, one listen of the broadcast transforms their thoughts, intentions, and behaviors. They begin to realign themselves, purge out self-destructive behaviors. When they purge out these self-destructive behaviors, it benefits them physiologically by no longer engaging in drug use and self-destructive behavior and so forth. It benefits their children. It benefits their significant other, their wife or their woman and so forth, their family members, realigning themselves with order, transforming their focus, and moving forward in a productive, harmonious fashion. We constantly receive feedback from people from one reading of the book, which has transformed their lives with the lives of their teenagers, or the lives of their husbands or quote-unquote men, boyfriends, and so forth, all in a positive direction. We need to get this information out wherever our people are, right where they are right now. We don't have time to wait around and hope that things will simply change and all this other nonsense. We can reach millions of our people right where they are, wherever they are in the world, no matter what socioeconomic condition they find themselves in. If they have a smartphone, they can download our book and they can download the video. And the more we are able to go out and do workshops, pass out free copies of the soft cover versions of the book, as well as expose them to the No Kwadifo option, that's part of the process as well. The No Kwadifo option, the distributor option, people simply purchase the books up front, wholesale, and then sell them retail. and the minimum order purchase is 10 books. Sometimes our people don't have the funds to purchase the first 10 books up front, and that's part of this process of dealing with the GoFundMe campaign, so that we will have the funds to be able to print out those books and distribute them to the prospective entrepreneurs on consignment. And therefore, we can just give them the first set of books, and, they can sell them, and then once they sell them, they can pay us back and then also order some more books and keep going after that. At this point, we're not able to do what we would like to do, where anybody who contacts us and says, I would like to sell some books, I don't have any money, can you send the first set up front on consignment and then I'll pay you later? We can't always do that. We've done that on a couple of occasions, but we're just not in the position to do that financially. If we were, we would, of course, do that immediately. So a major part of this GoFundMe campaign is to move that process forward. We can employ every Afurakani man in the community in various capacities. Some people will sell the book. We have other individuals who have taken the OBARIMA Afurakani manhood information from the workshops and began to teach within their community and have these kinds of sessions with these young Afurakani men in their communities and introduce the principal values of OBARIMA in their community, transforming lives in their communities right where the people are right now. They don't have to wait for, programs and other things to be developed. We can reach them immediately, overnight. We just need that access. So this is what the campaign is about. So you can see that, and we'll put the link in the chat room right now so you can see the actual campaign for that, the OBARIMA campaign. Again, Yedase for the individuals who have contributed, and please continue to share the information. The more people on board, the more people we can reach, not only with the free books and workshops, but then also with the soft cover books and the distributor piece. People should be able to come to people who are talking about culture on a regular basis and say, well, I need some employment. What can be done? And then we have an answer, and we do have that answer. The distributor program is that answer. So, and then we also have, when people come through trainings and so forth, they learn how to gather this information and convey this information, and they can begin to hold workshops themselves and sessions themselves. And some individuals, once they get, this information incorporated with their own being, then they can go to different places who are looking for people who teach at-risk youth, people who teach drug prevention or cultural programs, rites of passage type programs and so forth. And those people are able to be hired at those different businesses or not-for-profit organizations and so forth, because they see that they have an expertise. They see that these individuals are able to reach these youth, and they will pay you to come in and do the work that you learn from coming to our workshop. So you can employ yourself in that capacity as well. And there are many people who are working in the field of human services, case workers, case managers, social workers, therapists, and so forth. We trained on these various principles as well. So all that information you can see on the website, so check out the campaign for that. All right, so AKANFO NANASOM, Ancient Authentic Akhan Ancestral Religion, which we have every Joda, every Monday. We're dealing with the Akhan expression of ancestral religion, number one, because we are Akhan, but number two, because of the misinformation that is constantly propagated in the Western Hemisphere, as well as from individuals on the continent, as we said, who have been infected by white culture. So we talk about Akhan ancestral religion from an ancient, authentic ancestral perspective. Akhan people, about 20 million in Ivory Coast and Ghana today, one of the largest ethnic groups. We migrated from ancient Khanat, which is a title of ancient Nubia, thousands of years ago, migrated to the western part of the continent, reestablished the ancient empire of Khanat, called Ghana, a couple of thousand years ago. After Muslim invasions about 1,000 years ago, some of us have migrated south towards the transitional zone between the savanna and the forest belt region and reestablished Akhana or Akhan civilization in those regions, in today's Ivory Coast and Ghana. Then a few hundred years after that, some of our people were snatched up from those regions and forced into the Western Hemisphere during the Kwesi, the Great Perversity, the enslavement era. So this is how Akhan people coming from ancient Khanat and they called themselves the Kanat people and the Kanit people. Kan meaning first and foremost in the Akhan language, Kan meaning to calculate, to count, to reckon. That's the root of the name Akhan. So when you ask an Akhan person, why do you call yourself Akhan? Kan means first or foremost, from the beginning, meaning we were a component part of the first people in existence. Then Kan also means to calculate, count, to reckon, meaning we were the first, a component part of the first people to engage in calculation, measurement, study, the foundation of civilization, replicating a social order rooted in the divine order of creation through measurement, study, and so forth, building and everything else. When you look at the root of the term Khan from ancient Kanat, Nubia, in the Medutu, the language of and hieroglyphs of ancient Kemet and Kanat, you'll find that Khan once again means first and foremost. Khan also means to calculate, to reckon. Khan, as in Kanit, the Kanit people called themselves that, and of course the land itself being called Kanat were the exact same people who migrated from their ancient Kanat, the Kanit people, to the west, continued to call ourselves Akhan and so forth, all the way into the Western Hemisphere. And of course, when you look at our book, Hoodoo people, Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut in North America, Akhan, custodians of ancient Hoodoo from ancient Hoodoo land, Undunu land, ancient Kanit, Nubia. We also prove that the term Hoodoo comes from the Akhan language. The reason it means to conjure, and the Hoodoo tradition is called conjure, but it's also called root work, root medicine, and people who are engaged in the process are root workers and root doctors and so forth, is because the term Undu in the Akhan language means medicine from roots, trees, stumps, stalks, and so forth. The Undu Yefo is the people who engage in root medicine, root work, and so forth, but it also means to conjure. So the exact same meanings in Akhan are the same meanings that we brought into North America. The Akhan people's religion was maintained as Hoodoo in North America because we called an aspect of our tradition Undu in the Akhan tradition on the continent. Unbroken, same term. But we trace that even further back to ancient Kanat, Nubia, because another title of ancient Nubia is the Undu land. And the people called themselves the Undu people. And Undu also means root medicine from trees and stalks and roots and so forth, but it also means to conjure spirit. The exact same two meanings for the same term, dealing with the same ritual practices, as well as the name of the people and the name of the land. Udu people engage in Udu practices. We migrated to the western part of the continent. Akhan people still called their ritual medicine Udu, and the people Udu Yefo and Odu Sinifo, meaning the root workers, root doctors, root medicine, and so forth. And then when we come to North America, we continue to say Undu or Hoodoo, meaning the Hoodoo man and Hoodoo woman are the root workers, root doctors, and so forth. They're also the conjurers. Same culture, unbroken for thousands of years. So we prove that conclusively, and we're the first to prove that etymologically and cosmologically in our book, Hoodoo People. So we're just showing the continuity of culture for AKANFO NANASOM. So what we started a few weeks ago on the AKANFO NANASOM show, and this will be part 5 of the series, is a series called ODWIRAMAN. Ojira means purification. It also means a celebration of purification in the Akhan language. But when you look in ancient Kemet, you will also find in the Medutu, in the hieroglyphs, that Jira means purification. It also means a celebration of purification. So, for example, the Akhan New Year for millions of Akhan people is called Ojira, which means purification. That's the celebration of purification that you see written in the Medutu. So it's not simply a contemporary Akhan term. Jira is a term that, and we show the Medutu on our website from ancient Kemet and Kanat. So Jira means purification. Oman means nation in the Akhan language. It also means nation, community, people, the Aman, the nation, the community, the people. Ojiraman means the purified Jira nation, the purified Jira people, community, Aman. Ojiraman, the purified nation, the purified people. In ancient Kemet, Mind also means nation, community, and so forth, but it also means the West, as in the Western, the land of the setting sun, the region where the sun sets, the West. So Jida, mind, also means in ancient Kemet, in the language of ancient Kemet, the purified Jida, nation or community, mind, but also in the West. This is the terminology that we use to describe Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people, African people, black people, wherever we exist in the Western Hemisphere. Those of us who ended up in the Western Hemisphere, North, Central, South America, the Caribbean, and Europe as a result of the Kwesi, the great perversity, the enslavement era. We are returning to our ancestral culture. We are purifying ourselves, so therefore we are ODWIRAMAN, the purified nation. That is true in the Akhan language, but most importantly, it goes back directly to our parent language, ancient Kanat, ancient Kemet. When we talk about a parent language, we're not just talking about the first dynasty of Kemet. We're not just talking about early pre-dynastic Kemet. We're not just dealing with what the white snarl spring label as pre-dynastic Kemet. When you look at the words of our own ancestresses and ancestors, for example, in the so-called Turin papyrus, they lay out in that specific papyrus the origin of a governmental structure in ancient Kemet, beginning over 42,000 years ago, from their own word. Now, of course, if you look at the archaeological excavations, you will find that about 40,000 years ago, they talk about the Kormusan industry in ancient Kemet, so-called ancient Egypt and so forth, and the formation of, activity, societies and so forth 40,000 years ago. That simply is a reflection of what our ancestresses and ancestors laid out in that particular text in the so-called Turin papyrus over 42,000 years ago. Of course, they were speaking, communicating with one another. That parent language that they were speaking is the parent language from which these various languages of Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people all over the continent derive from. So the vast majority of our people living all over the continent, the languages that we have are simply derivations from that ancient parent language. So when we talk about Akhan or Yoruba, Ebeya, or Bakongo and various quote-unquote Niger-Congo languages and so forth, as well as the languages in East Africa, Afuraitkaitnit, they derive from that same ancient source tens of thousands of years ago. So when we utilize these terms, Jida, purification, mind, meaning nation, community, but also meaning the West, Jida mind, meaning the purified nation in the West, this is our designation for our people, based on our character, based on who we are. So we defined that notion of Jida mind, the purified nation, in that first broadcast. The second broadcast, we dealt with institution building and continuity within ODWIRAMAN, dealing with the nation of establishing institutions and through cultural cohesion, the continuity of these institutions, the perpetuation of these institutions, and so forth. That was that second broadcast. The third broadcast, we dealt with NANASOM, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, Ancestral Religion, the ritual incorporation of divine law and the ritual restoration of divine balance, which is the essence of Ancestral Religion, and how that is what is the glue that holds together all aspects of our culture. When we become religiously convicted, aligned with divine order, nobody can move us off of that conviction. And then we can begin to build and establish and maintain society, community, nation, rooted in ancestral religious values, the values rooted in divine order. So that is key to our liberation. NANASOM, ancestral religion, no matter what form it takes. Yoruba NANASOM, AKANFO NANASOM, Igbo NANASOM, Bakongo NANASOM, Basa NANASOM, Hudu NANASOM, Juju NANASOM, Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, ancestral religion. That is what NANASOM is. That is the key to our liberation. We did that broadcast last week. And then the fourth piece was Ebo, the nature of worth and value in ancestral economics. So our approach to economics from an ancestral perspective, an ancestral religious perspective rooted in purification, rooted in our community as an ODWIRAMAN. We are a unified community of disparate apart. But we're unified through our culture. We're unified through our spirit-genetic inheritance, unified through our ancestresses and ancestors. As a collective within the Western Hemisphere, we have become a nation unto ourselves, even though we have slight differences from different ethnic groups. But as a collective in the West, we are ODWIRAMAN. And of course, we have a relationship because we're connected to Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut on the continent as well. But just like they have a collective identity as well as individual identities within that collective, as subsets within that collective, we also have a collective identity in the West, as we have been governed by the energy of Asase Afur, the Earth Mother, in the West. And we have aligned with her energy in the West, so we have a collective character in the West. And then subsets within that collective are our individual ethnic group expressions. Akhan people in the West, Yoruba people in the West, Igbo people in the West, Bakongo people in the West, and so forth. So there's no separation between the subset, individuated identities as part of a larger collective in the Western Hemisphere. So this is what we're dealing with. So we talked about the nature of worth and value as Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people when we engage in economic activity as a group, as ODWIRAMAN, defining it from our own perspective, not dealing with the Eurocentric European approach to economics. So tonight we want to deal with ABAN, government, the nature of government in Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit ancestral culture, the manner in which we need to operate, the manner in which we need to govern ourselves, sound systems of governance and jurisprudence, the fifth principal value, nation building of Ancestral, as we have delineated in our book, OBARIMA, Afurakani, Manhood, and in other publications as well. 7 principal values of nation building, nation restoration, governed by the solar, lunar, and planetary bodies that govern the 7-day week, but also govern all natural cycles on Earth, including our chronobiological cycles we spoke about earlier. So that means that the forces in nature that govern our natural cycles, governing that 7-day period, that cycle, their energy contribute to these 7 principal values of nationhood. So therefore, it's a holistic set of 7 principles, something that is rooted in divine order. So the 5th principal value is establishing sound systems of governance and jurisprudence. And we'll go through the 7 quickly. The first principal value of ancestral nation building is establishing methods of food production and preservation. We're talking about establishing ourselves as an independent nation, just like our ancestresses and ancestors who are powered by ancestral religion, powered by hoodoo, powered by juju, powered by voodoo in North America, waged war against the white snail strain, and because of their wars, like the Gullah Wars, the wars initiated by Okumpo Yao, Nat Turner, Okumpo Kwabena, Denmark Vesey, and many others, we forced the end of enslavement. We forced the white snail offspring to accept abolition. We forced the white snail offspring into emancipation. It was these wars that we were waging against the white snail offspring that propelled them into the so-called Civil War, because we were causing so much damage to the so-called slave system. And the white snail offspring began to get nervous, and they were going to decide what were they going to do, what direction were they going to move in, because they saw the end of enslavement coming. They started looking into repatriation. They established the colony of Liberia and Sierra Leone, sending some of our people back to Afuraitkai, trying to get some of our people out of this country because we were waging war against the white snail offspring and massacring them. Then also using the tactic of spreading Christianity to brainwash as many of our people as possible, to make them more docile slaves. They were panicking because we were waging war and killing them. They saw what happened in Haiti. They saw what happened in, of course, various places in South America. They saw what was happening right here in North America. The Gullah Wars really caused them great consternation, just like the wars of Okumpo Yao, Nat Turner, Okumpo Kwabena, Denmark Vesey, Gabriel Prosser, and many others. So it was through ancestral religion that we brought the end to enslavement. That's what our ancestresses and ancestors did, because they were powered by ancestral religion. Of course, we have to take up the baton and move forward and complete the process. If they could do that then, we can do that now. So they established independent nations. For example, Dismal Swamp, thousands of people living in that region, Virginia, South Carolina, and so forth, independent and free during enslavement, raising their own crops, raising their children intergenerationally, and defending that quote-unquote Dismal Swamp that was a nation, an independent Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit nation right in the midst of colonial America. The whites in our spring tried to wage war and attack and drag them back into enslavement and invade Dismal Swamp. We waged war against them, defended the area with our military arms, with chemical and biological warfare, to the point that the whites in our spring began to ask us for peace treaties so they would stay away from Dismal Swamp if we stayed away from them. So our people established independent nations. We have that in our blood circle. Some of our people continued that process after enslavement, and they moved forward with the establishment of all black towns. So there was a tradition of some of our people, the same kinds of individuals from the same kinds of blood circles who established independent nations during enslavement and waged war against the whites in our spring. After enslavement was over, some of our people who had that same blood circle, that same kind of fire, even though physical enslavement was quote-unquote legally over, they knew the whites in our spring were still criminal, so they moved forward to begin to establish all black towns in the South, in the North, in the West, and different areas. And we move forward in that fashion. So when you're establishing it, and we, of course, we have the capacity to do the same thing today. So when you're establishing an independent nation, the first principal value is to establish methods of food production and preservation. You can't be independent and be dependent on your enemies to feed you. So you must engage in agricultural sciences and so forth from a holistic perspective, an ancestral perspective. The second principal value is to establish methods of curing disease. We must be able to heal all forms of disease, not being dependent on our enemies, but we have the plant life, animal life, mineral life that we can utilize to heal disease from our ancestral religious perspective. Of course, when we understood the pharmaceutical use and medicinal uses of various plants and minerals and so forth, the whites in our spring learned these various usages from our people and then began to, patent these things and act as though they came up with them later. The whites in our spring did not have a good record with regards to healing in the 1800s and the early 1900s, whether it was physical healing or mental health. They had a horrific record. They came to the people who were enslaved. For example, learning about penicillin from us and various other, medicines from us, because our people communicating with plant life, aligning with the spirits that animate plant life, learning the usages, the medicinal usages of these various plants as well as minerals and so forth. The whites in our spring understood we had this kind of knowledge. Some of it we brought from the continent, some of it we continued here and developed here based on the flora and fauna in these regions and our ability to communicate with the spirits that animate the flora and fauna in these regions. So, establishing methods of food production and preservation. We have that capacity. That is the second principal value of nation building. Third principal value is to establish a military structure. Anything that we build, we acquire some land, begin agricultural activities, curing disease and so forth, the whites in our spring will seek to destroy it. We must establish a military structure to defend ourselves against our absolute enemies because they are parasites, all of them who exist, all of them who have ever existed, and all of them who ever will exist until we make them extinct. The whites in our spring have always been the parasitical cancerous cells within the body of black humanity. They will seek to proliferate and consume and destroy unless they are exterminated. That is reality, and there's no exception to that reality. So we must establish a military structure just like your body has a military structure, your immune system and lymphatic system, to maintain its integrity. Internal dissension, toxins, bacteria, cancer cells, as well as external threats to the existence of the body. Bacteria and so forth and toxins streaming in from the outside. So we must deal with the external and internal threats effectively. So we must establish a military structure in order to defend the nation. The fourth principal value is the institutionalization of our values, meaning we build institutions, training institutions, cultural institutions, educational institutions, ritual institutions to teach the various aspects of nation building, whether it's textile development, curing disease, medicine, agriculture, everything we need, engineering. We need to have institutions that teach these things, training institutions, educational institutions, but also cultural and ritual, so that we institutionalize our values, so that we understand the value of the nation that we've established. Every man, woman, and child understands. And when you understand the nature and value of your nation, then you will seek to defend the nation with your life, and defend the nation by taking the lives of our enemies. And you will seek to perpetuate the nation and perpetuate the protocols, the culture that brought the nation into being and allowed the nation to unfold and flower in the way that it did and has and continues to do. So the institutionalization of value, establishing institutions, is the fourth principal value of nation building. The fifth principal value is establishing sound systems of governance and jurisprudence, so that when we have disputes, we learn how to redress grievances, mitigate disputes, so simple disputes don't escalate to the kind of conflagrations that will consume the nation, weaken the nation from the inside, so that it will begin to implode, and therefore parasites on the outside having opportunities to invade and destroy the nation. Sound systems of governance and jurisprudence. Of course, the sixth principal value is the building of homes, shelter, on acquired land. So we must acquire that land and build the shelter and other edifices on that land, dealing with engineering, of course, and other sciences. And then the final piece, of course, is clothing, development of textile, manufacturing, and so forth. So these seven principal values are key. What we're dealing with tonight, and we've dealt with the first four in ODWIRAMAN part 1, 2, 3, and 4. Tonight we're dealing with principle number 5, ABAN, the nature of government in ancestral culture. Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, ancestral culture. So we're going to check out one of our unpublished texts, some information from that text, and we're also going to check out the OBARIMA, Afurakani Manhood. We're going to get into that information as well. So there's a specific text, and we will be releasing this text. We've read from it before. We're going to make some modifications and release it. The Ptah Ankh Nut. So we're going to check out some information from this particular text. If you look at the images that we use for the event notification for the show, you see that we have some specific images. A couple you may be familiar with, and some that you may not be. So if you look at those 4 circles, we're going to go through that very quickly. The first one, the hieroglyphic symbol, the Manhood, is a determinative symbol. It's called Nut, and it represents the cross-sections, intersections from a bird's eye view of a city. It represents a city, a government, a polity, a nation. So you have the term Nut spelled out phonetically in the hieroglyphs in the Manhood, and then the determinative symbol, which determines the meaning of Nut, is like a cross-section, intersection of a couple of streets. It's like the bird's eye view of a region of a city, the center section of a city, representing a nation, a community, a people, and so forth. That's the symbol Nut. The next symbol next to that, you see that circular pattern, and that is the zodiac of Dendera. And when you look at it closely, it's actually, and you look at various representations of that, it's in the same structure as the Nut symbol, and we're going to get into that. The third piece is the OKRA, which is a medallion that the Oheni, the king, will wear in the Akhan culture. And when you look at the symbolism on the medallion, it's broken down into the same 4 quadrants, and we're going to get into detail about that. It's representative of that same symbol dealing with government. The polity, the symbol for the nation, the Nut, is dealing with a nation, a government, a polity, a community of people being governed in a harmonious fashion. When you look at the zodiac, the Dendera zodiac, it's talking about the different aspects of the sky, the entire set of constellations, the government of the sky, the constellations, the star systems, the energy, the our sun is a star, of course. The other stars, energy, these are greater suns, so to speak. So their energy impacts, just like our sun, which is a great star, impacts Earth. So the movements of the stars have an effect on plant life, animal life, mineral life, and us physiologically and spiritually as well. So that has to do with government. Then we deal with the OKRA that the soul washers wear, the Odwirafo wear, but also the Ohini, the sovereign wears, and it represents government, but it's also dealing with self-government, but it's also worn by the official that is a representative of the people. So the ancestress is an ancestor, talking about government. He's the central male figure in government, just like the Queen Mother is the central female figure in government. And then we have the ADWIRAMAN symbol called ABAN, which is the name of the show, ABAN. ABAN means government in the Akhan language. And when you look at that symbol, that ADWIRAMAN symbol for ABAN, meaning government, and then you look at the first symbol, which is the Nut symbol, which represents government in ancient Kemet, as you can see, that ADWIRAMAN symbol is the Nut, the same symbol, and you'll find that many of the ADWIRAMAN symbols, you will find them in the Medusa, in the hieroglyphs, because these are the same ancient symbols. They're not Akhan symbols that were developed in West Afuraitkaitnut 1,000 years ago or a few hundred years ago. These are ancient symbols that are thousands of years old that can be found in the Medusa, and this is one representation of that. Aban, meaning government. So, let's get to that Nut symbol itself. And what are we dealing with when we talk about the Nut symbol? The etymological origin of the term Nut, and it's referencing people, just like Ntu in Kikongo and the Bantu languages, meaning, people, Ntu, Bantu, the people, Muntu, one person, Bantu, more than one person, plural. That root Ntu is connected here to Nut, Nutu, and so forth. Referencing people comes from the ancient Kanitu and Kemet term Nut, Nutu. This term is defined as citizens, townspeople, inhabitants, natives. So we show the Medusa for that. The term Nut itself is dealing with a town, a government, a polity, a nation. And then when it has the determinative of the man and the woman in the plural, that means Nutu or Nut, meaning townspeople, the people of the Nut, the people of the nation, the people of the government, the people of the polity, the people of the municipality. So that's what it's dealing with. So the circular symbol is Nu, and then the T symbol, the loaf, concretizes the noun. So it's Nut, and then plural Nutu, Nutu. So we show the Medusa for that. We must understand the nature of this symbol. It's an aerial view of a town or a settlement. It is the grid pattern of a city, a polity represented by crossroads. When this symbol is used as a determinative symbol, a descriptive symbol added to the end of a term, it is referencing a region, a government, a place, or a state. However, this symbol is also used as a determinative symbol in the name of an important divinity in ancient Kemet. This Ntorot, this divinity, this goddess, has the name Nunut or Nanut, Nonet, which is variously spelled Nut, Nanut, Nonet, and so forth in the text of ancient Kemet. So when we deal with the cosmology of ancient Kemet, dealing with the primordial 8 divinities, you have Amen and Amenet, the great mother, the great father. Amen is the great father. Amenet is the great mother. They call it Nyame and Nyamewa in the Akhan language. The great hidden being. Men, Amen meaning hidden, concealed, invisible, but men also meaning stable, permanent, and abiding. Amen and Amenet are the great hidden, Amen, Amenet, stable, permanent, and abiding, men, Menet, being. That gives birth to all things. They give birth first to the black substance of space that is manifested as Ka and Kayak, the expansive and contractive force, a male and female force that is all pervasive. That black substance is a substance, a plasma, called dark energy and dark matter by the white Canal Spring. Now, previously they thought it was just a void. Our people always recognize that black substance to be the male and female forces Ka and Kaet, pervading all aspects of creation, the black substance within the great divine body of Amenet and Amen. Just like your melanin is a black substance within which your organs and cells dwell, the planets, sun, moon, stars, all things dwell within that black substance of space animated by Ka and Kaet, male and female expansive and contractive force of divine consciousness, intelligence. So that is Ka and Kaet. Within Ka and Kaet, Amen and Amenet birth Hehu and Hehu, or Huhu and Huhu, the male and female force of expansion and contraction dealing with fire, heat, and breath. So Huhu and Huhu, the vital principle begins to expand and contract within the black substance. That black substance begins to expand and contract at the beginning of creation, and that expansion and contraction of that black substance makes that black substance fluid. Just like you add heat to some water, first it's still. You add the heat, the Huhu, the heat, because the term Huhu in ancient Kemet or Hehu in ancient Kemet, it means expansion and contraction, means breath, but it also means heat. So just like when you blow on a fire, your breath, kindles the fire and expands it and so forth. The Huhu, which sounds like breath, of course, is also the Huhu, the fire, the heat, that's added to the black substance of space. Just like you add heat to water, that still water to begin to expand and contract, it begins to move, and then the birth of waves within the water manifest. So when Amen and Amenet first give birth to Ka and Kaet, the black substance of space that has the expansive contractive energy that governs all things that will develop within that black substance. The next piece is the birth of Huhu and Huhuet, the expansive and contractive force of vitality and breath and heat. And once that expansion and contraction begins to move within the black substance of space, Huhu and Huhuet, this male and female force begins to expand and contract. Later within your body, when you develop, they manifest in your body as the breath, expansion and contraction within your lungs. But they begin to expand and contract and move that black substance. And just like the heat causes the water begin to boil, but at first simply to vibrate, the manifestation of waves comes forward. Those waves of energy, birthed within the black substance, moving back and forth within the black substance. That is the birth of Nun and Nunet, or Nu and Nu, waves of energy. And when they spell the names of Nun and Nunet, they use the wavy line, water line, but it's also an electromagnetic wave. And when that wave line, the up, down line is truncated, you just have one line going up, one line going down, another line going up, and then it's cut off. That is the letter N in English because it comes from that same symbol in ancient Kemet, the N symbol. And the energy manifest of these waves vibrating within the black substance, the birth of Nun and Nunet, is the Nun energy, that primordial inert energy, that buzzing, humming energy. When Nun and Nunet, the wavy energy, begin to unite and wave very rapidly, then they give birth to spheres. Just like the wave energy in the pot of boiling water, first it's just water waving, but then the waves become so rapid that they give birth to spheres, bubbles that rise up out the pot and pop. The wave energy of Nun and Nunet begin to wave so rapidly that they unite and give birth to spheres that rise up out of the black substance explosion of fire and light in spheres. That is the birth of Ra and Ra'et, the birth of fire and light piercing the black substance for the first time in the creation of the universe. Then Ra and Ra'et, as spheres of fire and light, begin to spiral through the black substance, carving out black spheres. And once those black spheres of substance are carved out, the energy of Ra and Ra'et penetrates those spheres, illuminating them, giving birth to stars. And then from the stars, planets are birthed and so forth. Of course, stars are called black bodies in physics because of the nature of their construction. Those black bodies come from the black substance of space that are illuminated through Ra and Ra'et. So we give that cosmological information. We go into some more detail about that. We just want to summarize that because we were talking about Nun and Nunet, or Nu and Nu. That same symbol, that Nut symbol that talks about a space, a place, dealing with government, a polity, a settlement, and so forth. it derives from that original space or place that carries the energy that is the potential energy for all things coming into being. Once Nu and Nut get together, they give birth to Ra and Ra'at, the Creator and Creatress, who are the grandchildren, by the way, of Amen and Amenet, the Supreme Being. With the black substance of space being vitalized by Hehu and Hehut, the breathing principle, the expansive and contractive principle. And once that black substance begins to expand and contract, it gives birth to waves of energy. And that wave of energy, that Nun energy and Nunet energy, that is the primordial energy from which all things can come into being. That is the root energy of being. Everything that comes into being out of that is founded from that root energy. That root energy that gives us life, gives us our being, and so forth. So that's the original Nun and Nunet, or Nu and Nu. And when you see the spelling of them, you'll see the wavy lines and everything else. But then you'll also see it being spelled with the same symbol of the polity, the same symbol of the cross-section of the street, the intersection. And it's also shown with the sedge plants dealing with the root energy, the root plant, the root energy of being. So you'll see the root energy when you're looking, for example, in the Meru text, the pyramid text, when they talk about Nu and Nut, as well as Amen and Amenet, the earliest attestation of these names in ancient Kemet, going back to the pyramid text, the oldest religious scriptures that exist on earth to date. You'll find Amen and Amenet together in those most ancient texts, and Nu and Nut together in those most ancient texts, and you'll see the spelling of the pet symbol, but then you'll see the root plants, the sedge plants, and you'll see the symbol of the Nu, Nut symbols for their name. So Nu and Nut in the world, dealing with the polity of government, the cross-section, the aerial view of a city, the cross-section, intersection of the streets and so forth, representing this is the place, this is where everything takes place. This is where everything is born. This is where everything is structured. This is where the government, the regulation comes from. This is the nation state, but it comes from that original place or state where the energy is birthed, where that wave energy is birthed, the root energy of being is birthed, that Nun and Nunet, the wave energy within the black substance of space. You see that black substance, but there's an energy within the black substance. It's like electromagnetic energy. You can see a magnet, but then that magnetic field, that magnetic energy, you don't see it, but you can see the effects of that black substance of space. You can see, but then that electromagnetic wave energy is within that black substance. That is the root energy of being. That's Nun and Nunet, from which everything will be born. All things will be born. That is the place or space dealing with that. So this is why we talk about the origins of the Nut symbol. Now, we're going to scroll down real quick in this piece. We went through that. And I know you don't have this text, but when we release it, very soon you'll have access to this information. Now, that black watery mass of space, is a portion of that becomes the black watery mass in our body, which is the chemical melanin. It is a miniature version of the black watery mass of the Ka and Kayat in the universe. And within the Ka and Kayat, the black substance, is the energy of Nun and Nunet, the wave electromagnetic energy, so to speak. In the same fashion, we have the black substance in our bodies, and melanin is an electromagnetic chemical. It's a chemical with electromagnetic properties. It is a conducer and a conductor of electromagnetic energy. On both levels, Nun and Nunet is the place, space, region, state where activation occurs for creative and regenerative purposes. It is the state of being where creation takes place, because remember, the energy within the black substance is Nun and Nunet, and from that wave energy, just like the waving energy of the pot gives birth to spheres, the wave energy in the black substance of space gives birth to Ra and Ra'at. So when we say that black energy substance with the wave energy, Nun and Nunet is the place, space, region, or state where activation occurs for creative and regenerative purposes. It is the state of being. State as in a state like a government, but state of being, where creation takes place, a state, a region, a place. This is the reason why the term Nut is used in the mundane sense to describe a state, a region, a place, a social order, a polity, a nation. Because the original Nun and Nunet energy is the place, the root energy of being from which creation occurs, from which regeneration occurs, creativity and procreativity is born. Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit society is a civilized society. This means that we develop social orders rooted in the divine order of creation. All that proceeds from Nu and Nut is orderly. We seek to replicate this order when we establish a nation, town, village, society, when we establish our own Nut, our own nation, our own state, our own region, our own government. We want to establish something from which creativity can be born and regulated in harmony, just like the great Nun and Nunet from which Ron Ryder's birth, creativity and organization and regeneration born from that original state or state of being or energy. While the masculine Nu or Nun is the state condition, the feminine Nut is the place or region. The male can impregnate the female in the right state, under the right condition. However, gestation, development, and birth can only occur in and through her place, her womb. He is the state, she is the place. Nut is the place where the root energy commingles and is the place from which the conceived is birth. So that's why Nut with the T is talking about a place, the concretization of that space where things will take place, unfold, develop in a harmonious fashion. This is the nature of government. And then we show, in the text, we also show the different spellings of Nun and Nunet and so forth, and we show the hieroglyphic of that Nut symbol. And we talk about its meaning. So we talk about the rectangular symbol representing the lower and upper regions of the sky, the heavens as viewed from earth, the rooted plant, which is phonetically Nun, meaning inactive or inert, that primordial energy, and all of that. So we talk a little bit about that. And we talk about Ra and Ra'at, rising up out of the Nun and Nunet, the life force's birth from its essence, from the Nun, from the Nu. So we want to scroll down real quick, and we're going to get to some more information. Now, if you look at those four symbols, and we show the first one, of course, is the Nut symbol. You'll also see, for people who are familiar with the Bakongo tradition, the Dikenga dia Congo, the cosmogram, the four positions of the sun and so forth. You'll see that it fits directly within that because it's born of that. That Nut symbol is the same symbol. In the Akhan tradition, we have different Adinkra symbols that are directly connected as well. We didn't place the Sum Sum symbol in here, but it's the same symbol. Sum Sum meaning spirit, but that same symbol, fourfold division, you will find in that symbol. But we want to focus specifically on government here, so we're going to get to the Adinkra symbol, ABAN, which is one of the symbols in the event notification that you see in the event of notification for tonight's show. ABAN in Akhan, which is the exact same Nut symbol from ancient Kemet. ABAN literally means government. It is within this governmental structure that our individual and collective functions, destinies unfold. ABAN, government, delineates the parameters and the perimeter of our proper functioning in creation. While on the surface, the ABAN represents the floor plan of the governing house. That's what that symbol represents. The fourfold nature of the symbol defines the cycle of our conception, birth, maturation, and death, which is also rebirth. ABAN is not merely representative of the governance of a state, but also of self-governance. It is said about ABAN, Pa, good government, in Akhan. Pa means good, ABAN, Pa means good government, good ABAN. Omai mu ye die a ene wo fie, which means what peace and progress a society, nation, community knows may be indicated by what prevails in the household in that society. In Akhan culture, the Oman, the nation, is recognized to be a microcosm of the created order, the macrocosm, a society. And Oman is a social order rooted in the divine order of creation. This order is replicated in the structure of the households which govern themselves as Oman in miniature, nations in miniature. And again, Oman means nation in Akhan, but as we said earlier, Mine also means a nation or community in ancient Kemet. So the households govern themselves as Oman or nations in miniature, and further within the individual inhabitants who learn through the various stages of life, naming ceremonies, rites of passage, marriage, elderhood, eldershood, ancestorhood, ancestresshood, how to govern themselves in harmony with divine order. So these different stages of life, different activities taking place at different junctures, this all has to do with governance, self-governance, governance of the individual, governance of the family, governance of the household, governance of the village, the clan and so forth, the village, and of course the nation. It all unfolds in the same pattern. The ABAN structure is also replicated in the Ohenikra Konmuade, which is the king or the sovereign, that medallion, that gold medallion we show in the notification. It has the same structure as the ABAN, the Adinkra symbol for governance. It's worn by the sovereign, who is the quote-unquote governor, just like the female sovereign is the governess, so to speak, the king and queen mother, the Ohini and Ohema. So you see that symbol, but it's also a symbol of the Kra. Why is it a symbol of the Kra? Because the Kra governs our soul, our divine consciousness, our Kra, our Krawa, our Ka, our Kaet. Order Inu governs every aspect of our lives. It is the spirit's brain. The brain regulates or governs all activities in the body. The spirit's brain regulates or governs all activities within the spirit body. So the symbol for the Kra that's worn by the sovereign is a symbol of the soul, but it's also the symbol of self-governance, and its features aesthetically directly represent the Nut symbol, which represents government, the polity, the governance of the people, but also governance of the individual. So we say it's the Ohini Kra Komwade is worn around the neck of the Akhan Ohini king as a protection for his Kra, his soul, divine consciousness. It is a tool for self or spiritual governance. As the head of the Aban, the government of the Oman, the nation, and the sum total of the spirit of the people, the Ohini, the king, must maintain spiritual balance. The Ohini embodies the Oman, the nation. His spiritual sustenance is paramount, for imbalance in the head leads to imbalance in the body, the community. He is a representative of the people to the ancestresses and ancestors. On balance, the Ohema, the queen mother, is a representative of the ancestresses and ancestors to the people, spirit possession and so forth. The fourfold nature of the Ohini Kra Konmuade, that symbol, delineates the life cycle of the Ohini, the sovereign, and the Oman, of the nation. It is a template ritually utilized to align and realign the spirit with its essential nature through its protective function. The Ohini Kra Komwade is conceptually and functionally a newt. It is the same little newt that you see in ancient Kemet. We simply have one of those newt symbols on a medallion of gold worn on our chest. And it's a symbol dealing with the Kra, so the person learns to align his Kra with divine order. When he aligns himself and realigns himself with the governance of the Kra, the force in nature in the head region that governs all aspects of your spirit body, then he is a representative of the people to the ancestresses and ancestors. If the people are out of order, the king is out of order, he goes before the ancestresses and ancestors as a representative of the Oman, of the nation, and he's out of order, and they sanction him and sanction the community and get us back in order, admonish the community, sometimes causing different things negatively to happen to the community so that we will recognize that we are out of order. It's like if you consume some foods you shouldn't consume, you create disorder in your body, and the nation, the cells begin to suffer. When you realign yourself with order, and purify yourself, then the cells, the community, begin to get back in harmony with order, and they live a normal cellular life. The same with us. If we take things into our mind, into our nation, into our polity, into our government that are out of harmony with order, the whole Oman, the nation, the entity will begin to suffer. And Oman, a nation, is a community, it is a people, it is an entity in and of itself. It has a life in and of itself. And Oman, a nation, can be born, live in harmony with order, but it can also suffer and die. But it also can be reborn. So when we talk about ODWIRAMAN, the purified nation, like Asar, we died, and then we are reborn in the West. He's called Kanti Amintu, the first of the Westerners. He goes to the West and dies, but then he is resurrected. So ODWIRAMAN, the purified nation in the West, we died to the knowledge of specific aspects of our culture on the surface, but deep inside our ancestral blood circles, that culture is still there, and we resurrect that culture, bring it out from the roots, down deep, up to the surface, to reestablish ourselves and maintain our sovereignty. Those people who maintain the ancestral culture dug deep into the Nunet, the root energy of being. They were able to extract that energy, birthing that energy of Ra and Right within themselves, that explosive power, and then they waged war against the white snare offspring and were successful in bringing an end to enslavement in North America, as well as in the Caribbean and South America and so forth, and Central America. So we're talking about governance, self-governance, communal governance, spiritual governance, all rooted in that root energy of being, the Nun and Nunet. That Nut symbol represents that. Okay, so what we're going to do right now, we're going to go into the next piece. We just wanted to lay that foundation real quick. Now, if you look at the circle itself, and even if you look on the front cover of our book, OKRA Complex, the Soul of AKANFO, and we have the image of the brain itself, talking about that's the physical seat of the Ka, the crown of the Ka, and so forth, the throne of the Ka, and so forth. And we show it from the back so you can see on the top, of course, are the right and left hemispheres, on the bottom of the cerebral cortex, on the bottom are the right and left hemispheres of the cerebellum. So it's a fourfold structure. It's like a circle that's divided into four quadrants, like a northeast, southeast, northwest, and southwest quadrant. But you look at the brain, the right and left hemispheres, the cerebral cortex, the right and left hemispheres of the cerebellum. You have what we call the Shebia and She on the cerebellum, the Nkrabia and the Nkra on the cerebral cortex, the fourfold division of the Kra, dealing with the divine function we have to execute, Nkra, the manner in which we have to execute that function, Nkrabia, that's the cerebral cortex, the configuration of energy we've been given to execute that function, the She, and the manner in which we have to utilize that energy to support our function without creating disorder in the process, Shebia. So the fourfold division of the brain is akin to the fourfold division of the spirit's brain. The cerebral cortex has all of the programs and regulatory programs to the various, cells within the body, organs, and systems. The cerebellum deals with motor movement and power and equilibrium and so forth. In the spirit's brain, the cerebral cortex, the Nkra and Nkrabia deals with our divine function. What do we come into the world to execute? What kind of cell in the great divine body are we? If we're an immune system cell, we're going to be naturally inclined and wired in our spirit's brain towards immune system functions, and we'll move towards military occupations, policing occupations, and so forth, because we're naturally inclined towards that kind of function because that's wired within us. That's in the cerebral cortex of the spirit's brain. In the cerebellum portion of the spirit's brain that deals with equilibrium and motor movement and power and balance, we're talking about the She and Shebia, the fourth She of compulsion and impulsion to execute our function, the kind of power we've been given to support our function, She and Shebia, and the manner in which we are to utilize. So that's the fourfold division of the Kra, the soul, the divine consciousness. What you are to execute and the power you have been given to execute. What is your function, how you are to execute it, and the specific configuration, unique configuration of power you have been given to execute that function. If you have a fiery function, that's what you are to execute. And then there's a manner in which you must execute that function. But at the same time, you're given a configuration of fiery energy so that you can execute that function. And you need to learn how to utilize that energy, how to expand it, how to contract it, how to turn it on, how to turn it off, when to use it in certain situations, when to remain idle, and so forth. So that's the Shan Shepi. So that's what we're doing with. So if you look at that fourfold division, now we're going to get into that fourfold division of government in the world, and then within the individual and the community, the ODWIRAMAN, the nation, showing that we are a collective. In the West, we are a collective. The mind in itself is an entity. It's like your body is an entity. Yes, you have subdivisions of your body, your different organs, and they have cells, and they have their own identities and so forth, but they are interdependent. As ODWIRAMAN, we are a collective of Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people in the West. And then we have subgroups, organs within that collective, within that great body. And yes, we need to adhere to our subgroups, because when, brain cells serve the brain, they're serving the whole body. Liver cells serve the liver, they're serving the whole body. So when we adhere to our ancestral subgroups, as Akhan in the West, as Yoruba in the West, as Igbo in the West, as Bakongo in the West, and so forth, we are serving the specific group of, or organ of which we are a component part. And when we do so, we are serving the collective at the same time. So we're not just some blind, blurred group of Pan-Africans, and then that's it with no identity. We have an identity. Yes, we are Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit people. Inherent within that title is the true notion of Pan-Africanism. But subdivisions within that are the different organs. Your organs would just say, hey, we're not going to talk about we're different organs with different functions in the body. We're just going to say we are all body entities. We're not going to divide ourselves, and tribalism is a problem. We're not going to call ourselves organs anymore. We are just parts of the body, and that's it. We're just body structure. And we're not going to focus on our design any longer. Your body would collapse because that's nonsensical. The only people who walk around talking about, I don't know where I come from in Africa, so I claim it all and forget about tribalism because that caused all of our problems. That's born of ignorance. And it's born of the kind of ignorance that's planted in us by the whites and their offspring, because they don't want us to embrace who we are ancestrally, because when we do so, we access our unique configuration of power that's being given to us by the Supreme Being through the agency of ancestral dispensation, through our ancestral bloodline, blood circles. If we don't deal with that, we just walk around like a cell in the body saying, well, I'm not a heart cell anymore. I'm just a body cell. I'm not going to put myself in any box. And it will no longer support heart functions because it doesn't want to be part of a specific compartment. It just wants to be a pan body cell. If it stops supporting heart functions, and the liver cells stop supporting liver functions, and the spleen cells stop supporting spleen functions because they just want to be pan body cells, then the whole body collapses because they are being ignorant, because they've been brainwashed. The same thing has happened with us. So we have denigrated our own culture, our own ancestral culture, ancestral religious culture, because the whites and offspring have convinced us through Christianity, Islam, and other things that we just need to focus on being quote-unquote united and forget about our differences. That's a political ploy to keep us self-destructive. That's like erasing the memory of all your cells, and they forget what kind of cells they are, and they just try to become body cells. That's nonsensical. So we're going to deal with the government of the self, government of the body, government of the nation, and so forth. So if you look at that fourfold structure, if you look at a circle divided into four quadrants, you look at the earth itself, the upper half as viewed from earth, the upper half is like the upper half of a calabash. And in one of our unpublished parts of the document, the upper half of the calabash, the sky and the earth and so forth, everything that is seen, that upper half or hemisphere of the globe, so to speak, is the Tawi, as we would call it, the physical world, the upper hemisphere of that circle. The lower hemisphere, the lower half of the circle, the lower half of the calabash we call the Dua, the spirit realm, the lower hemisphere, that which is unseen. Now, at the same time, you have the right hemisphere of the circle. The northeast, quote unquote, and southeast quadrants together is the right hemisphere. So we already talked about the upper half of the calabash and the lower half. Now we're going to split it vertically. The right half of the calabash vertically, we call it Wab, or ritual purification healing. This is what Wab means. Wab means purification, ritual purification, and so forth. The right hemisphere of the circle. The left hemisphere of the circle we call Uchat, meaning cultural purification. So the right hemisphere is ritual purification. The left hemisphere is cultural purification. We're going to get into why we talk about that. The horizontal line splitting the circle in two halves, the upper and lower hemispheres. That line is the female aspect of divine law, the horizontal line, which is Ma'at. And then the line going straight down the middle vertically is the male aspect of divine law, that is Ma'al. So we talk about Ma'al and Ma'at, the male and female forces of divine balance. The vertical line being Ma'al, the horizontal line being Ma'at. The lines of demarcation, that which we utilize as a standard for divine law that we measure ourselves against. Now, when we talked about the upper and lower halves of the calabash, upper half dealing with that which is seen, the lower half dealing with the unseen, the so-called underworld, the spirit realm, and so forth. If you look at the right hemisphere, the Wab, it represents the influence of the deity, the divine spirit forces in nature. That is the lower right quadrant. That's like, if you look at northeast, the lower quadrant is that which is the northeast part of the circle, the northeast part or the right part of the quote-unquote underworld. Then above that is the northeast quadrant on the top. So, I'm sorry, the one on the bottom is the southeast quadrant. That's under the line of demarcation. It's in the underworld. It's the right half of the underworld calabash. That represents the deities, the divine spirit forces in nature. Right above them is the quadrant above the earth. And the representatives of the deities on earth are the healers and healeresses, the hoodoo men, hoodoo women, obia men, obia women, the okomfo, abosomfo, the priests and priestesses and so forth, the grandmothers and grandfathers and uncles and aunts, mothers and fathers who are healers, healeresses, and so forth. They engage in ritual purification and healing. That is the right half of the circle. On the bottom right half, dealing with ritual purification, is the power that's in the underworld of the right half. Those are the deities, forces in nature. Right above them, on the surface, those you can see are the physical representatives of the deities that are in the quote-unquote spirit world, unseen world. The physical representatives are their vehicles in the physical world, the healers and healeresses. Then you look at the left hemisphere that we call Uchat. And you look at the bottom part of the left hemisphere, that represents the ancestresses and ancestors who are spiritually cultivated. This is cultural purification, cultural governance. And then right above that, in the left hemisphere, are the representatives on earth of the ancestresses and ancestors, which are the spiritually cultivated elders and elders. So when you look at that circle, once again, if you look at the upper half of the calabash, that is the sky and earth and everything that can be seen. The bottom half of the calabash is that which is under our feet, that which is in the quote-unquote underworld, that which is unseen. If you look at the right half of the calabash, you'll see on the bottom, you have the spirits in nature, those that are unseen, the unseen forces. Their representatives on earth are their vehicles, which are the healers and healeresses. They bring the energy of the unseen to the seen. That's ritual purification. In the left hemisphere of that circle, you have the unseen forces, which are the ancestresses and ancestors. And their representatives in the physical world are the elders and elderesses who are spiritually cultivated. they are the vehicles for the ancestresses and ancestors in the community, so that is cultural purification. The deities and their representatives deal with ritual purification. The ancestresses and ancestors and their representatives, the elders and eldresses, deal with cultural purification, dealing with government. So, and we go into some detail about that. And then, of course, the center point is that Ka and Ka'at. Everything is summed up in that central point. So, before we go forward with that, we want to go into the chat room right quick. Make sure we didn't miss anything. You have any questions or comments on the phone line, hit the number 1. If you have any questions or comments in the chat room, you must log in as a user in order to interact in the chat room. And give me 1 second, I'm going to plug in right quick. So the key here is, just to summarize that portion, the Nut symbol itself represents a government, a polity, a nation, a people. Nutu, meaning citizen, is the aerial view of a cross-section of a city, intersection, and so forth, a grid pattern of the structure of a city from the bird's eye view. So that's the Nut symbol, representing government. Then you have that same Nut symbol, the cross-section of the streets and so forth, representing government in the Akhan tradition, called ABAN as the Adinkra symbol, representing the government of the people. Of course, in the Bakongo tradition, you have the Dekinga symbol, the 4 positions of the sun and so forth, and it's dealing with the governance of your life. Also in the Akhan tradition, you have that same Nut symbol carved into the symbol that's worn on the chest, medallion, pendant of the Ohini of the sovereign, dealing with the Kra, dealing with self-governance. You see that 4-fold division in the different hemispheres of the brain. Cerebral cortex, right and left hemispheres, cerebellum, right and left hemispheres, dealing with the governance of every aspect of the body, and the spirit's brain has that same 4-fold division of that Nut, of that governing principle, governing the spirit body as well. And then we show for in the world. If you look at a circle carved into 4 quadrants, the upper half is that which can be seen, the lower half is that which is the unseen, the spirit realm. The upper right quadrant is that which can be seen, and right up under that upper right quadrant is what cannot be seen in the right hemisphere. What can't be seen is the spiritual forces in nature, the unseen forces that animate that which can be seen. The representative spiritual forces in nature, the deities, the Abosom, the Orishas, the Bodu, and so forth, Ntorotu, are their representatives, their vehicles, the priests and priestesses, and so forth, and they deal with ritual purification. In the upper left quadrant is that which can be seen in the upper left hemisphere. The lower left quadrant is that which is unseen in the left hemisphere. That which is unseen are the spirits of the ancestresses and ancestors, the Nananom Nsamanto, the Egungun, the Kubito, and so forth. The Aku and Aku is called in ancient Kemet. And their representatives on earth in the community are the spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors. They are the vehicles for them. They speak through them. So when a truly spiritually cultivated ancestor or elder or elderess speaks, one of the Nananom Mpanyinfo, then the words of the ancestresses and ancestors, the Nananom Umsamampo, who are spiritually cultivated, is coming through. So they are the representatives in the physical world of those who are unseen in the spirit world. That is cultural purification. Ritual purification in the right hemisphere, cultural purification in the left hemisphere. And cultural purification dealing with government and governance physically, individually, as well as spiritually and collectively. All right. Now we want to talk about specific aspects of that self-governance and other applications. Okay, there was a question about, is there any validity to the info that Polite or Alim Bey teaches about land and sovereignty? All of the information that you find, people who are associated with some kind of Moorish nonsense, Noble Drew Ali or the homosexual rapist, pedophile, Malachi York, that idiot, that pervert, teaching nonsense. Cosmologically, everything he teaches is pure nonsense. But then them adding the sovereign citizens movement nonsense, all of that, quote unquote, sovereignty talk is coming from the whites and their offspring. The sovereign citizens movement, that information is where they get, and patriot law and all of that. They simply copied that information from white, white writers, right? People who've been publishing these books on, common law and patriot law and independent citizens movement and sovereign citizens movement. That was all for their community. Then brainwashed Negroes started studying that information and tried to apply it to our people. None of that information has any foundation. The whites and their offspring don't care anything about you pulling out some paperwork and talking about your sovereign and all of that idiocy. They don't care anything about that. If you don't have any military, if you don't have a means by which to force your will, they don't care about anything. And that includes not only military, metal armaments, but chemical and biological weapons of warfare that we have used for hundreds of years. We talked about that with Nana Kwame Afrani, so-called George Washington Carver, and people throughout the wars of aggression against the whites and their offspring, wars of insurrection, rebellion, waging war against the whites and their offspring during enslavement to free ourselves from enslavement. Yes, we acquired metal armaments, but we also utilized chemical and biological weapons of warfare to massacre the whites and their offspring. Just like we use that kind of technology then, we have the capacity through ancestral religious practices to do so today. And that's a major weapon of warfare that we include in our ritual practices. So, but if you don't have the capacity to enforce your independence, the whites and offspring don't care anything about what you say. That sovereignty paperwork is pure nonsense. First of all, the whites and offspring don't respect their own law, let alone some Negro trying to run around with some paperwork talking about you have to listen to what I'm saying because it says so right here on this piece of paper. That's idiotic. It's a cowardice move. It's a way to not confront the whites and offspring. When you fear the whites and offspring, you look for all kinds of escape hatches to not have to confront them. So if you bury yourself in pseudo paperwork and say, well, this is all we need, and they will back up off of us, you're just giving yourself an excuse to not have to confront them physically through physical warfare with metal armaments, chemical and biological armaments, and so forth. This is what cowards do. And this is the basis of this nonsense. Of course, the whole piece dealing with identity and Moors and, being sovereign because we're Moors is 100% false, and they know that. Of course, we published our book, Moor Means Dead, proving that the term Moor literally means dead. Black people are not Moors. That is idiotic. We have never been that. That's always been a derogatory term. It has nothing to do with our identity, has nothing to do with nationality and so forth. That's pure stupidity, pure idiocy. It actually comes from the whites and their offspring and is spread by their black proxies throughout the country. And of course, they're just a small, insignificant movement of brainwashed individuals promoting that nonsense because they really deep down inside fear the whites and their offspring and see them as superior. So therefore, they do not want to confront them. So they're coming up with all kinds of schemes to try to work their way around confronting the actual enemy. So, all right, so we're going to go quickly to our book, OBARIMA, Afurakani Manhood, because we want to deal with the section, the fifth section, dealing with sound systems of governance and jurisprudence, but specifically exercising proper insight in order to make proper judgments in life. That is the fifth principle of Afurakani manhood, of course, Afuraitkaitnit womanhood as well, but that fifth principle is connected to the fifth principle, fifth day of the week, of course, which is the day Yauda or Yada, Abada, Thursday. The divinities that govern that day is Yao, Ya, and Abba, which is Heru, Wachet, and Nekabet in ancient Kemet and Kanit. It is Yao, Ya, and Abba in the Akhan tradition. It is Shango, Oya, and Oba in the Yoruba tradition, it is Hevioso, Abejida, and Ayaba in Vodun, dealing with sovereignty, dealing with rulership, dealing with governance. Of course, Yao is the divinity that is Heru, which is the governor. Shango is the king, the ruler. Of course, Oya is the co-ruler. In ancient Kemet, you have Heru, the king, patron divinity of the various kings and so forth. You have Wachet and Nekabet, which is Ya and Aba and Oya and Oba and so forth, on the crown of the king and so forth, in the form of two cobras, or the cobra and the vulture, dealing with the protection of royal sovereignty. Wachet and Nekabet, tutelary divinities of the sovereignty of the two lands of the north and the south. So let's get into this real quick, because we don't want to talk about self-governance and then show how that has to do with the governance of our people in a nation and so forth. So in this book, this is the fifth principal value of OBARIMA in this particular section of the book, talking about insight, and we'll show the application. So we say that when an Afurakani male recognizes Nyame wa Nyame and Sheshe divine order, which manifests throughout creation as the balance of male and female, when he establishes that balance in every aspect of his existence. So the first principal value of manhood is recognizing that divine order. The second principal value is establishing that balance within every aspect of your existence. Third, once he has established that divine balance within himself, in his home, in his relationships, in his family, and in his circle, he arms himself to defend on every level that order and balance with his life. Arms is the third principal value of manhood. When he continuously engages in the process of respecting or reviewing every thought, intention, and action, and harmonizing each with divine order, that is the fourth principal value of manhood. Through that divine decision-making process, the Afurakani male is then poised to cross the threshold of OBARIMA manhood on the individual level. And of course, it's the same principle with regard to womanhood, those principal values of order, balance, arms, and respecting, reviewing every thought, intention, and action, and aligning each with divine order. So then you get to the point dealing with individual manhood, individual womanhood, and so forth. The tools that the Afurakani male has so far developed and internalized are necessary and sufficient for him to survive and thrive within any situation or condition wherein he finds himself at any moment in time. At the same time, new situations and problems will confront him and his people that have no precedent, and old situations, problems which have never been addressed sufficiently nor resolved will resurface. As life advances, we move into different cycles that are governed by different configurations of forces. These different cycles require that we utilize our thoughts, intentions, and actions in new and proper ways to confront and overcome the new obstacles. The different cycles also provide us an opportunity to resolve problems with a rejuvenated spirit that were left unresolved by previous generations. Now we're getting into governance, self-governance, but also how that self-governance deals with new problems, obstacles that will manifest, and previous problems that were never solved that are still causing problems within our nation, within our society, that we must address through this energy of Heru and Wachet and Nekabet and so forth. The Afurakani OBARIMA man is thus one who exercises proper insight in order to make proper judgments in life. The Afurakani male then crosses the threshold of OBARIMA manhood when he recognizes that exercising proper insight allows him to participate in the process of setting the precedents for overcoming new obstacles and bringing resolution to those problems which have been left unanswered. And that is the crux of governance: overcoming new obstacles, bringing resolution to old problems which had been left unanswered, so that the nation, the entity, which is a living entity, can continue to operate in a harmonious fashion. It starts off with self-governance and insight. And of course, when we talk about insight, the inner eye and so forth, the eye of Heru, we get into that. One may contract a disease and uses knowledge and awareness to reestablish balance, health to his body. He draws on the knowledge he has gained and the precedents that have been set to effect the cure. He may cure others as well with the time-tested method. However, one may move into a new environment, as we have, and come into contact with toxins that have never been encountered before. There's no precedent set for establishing a cure for the new disease patterns that develop. The Afurakani OBARIMA, man, as well as the Afuraitkaitnit woman, must be able to confront the new challenge and overcome it. He must exercise proper insight in order to make proper judgment. This means that in order to be OBARIMA, man, the Afurakani male, must invoke his intuition, his insight, which is rooted in his OKRA, his soul, his divine consciousness, a drop from the ocean of divine consciousness of Inyamewa Inyame. His OKRA, the soul, the divine consciousness, called Ka and Kai in ancient Kemet. When he invokes his insight, we call NHOMA in the Akhan language, his insight, which is the Eni, the eye of his OKRA, his soul, he recognizes the manner in which he must apply his intelligence gathering process to confront and overcome new challenges that will confront him and his people. The Afurakani OBARIMA, man, must also invoke his NHOMA, his insight, in order to resolve problems that have been left unresolved in our Oman nation. Those problems that have kept us stagnant, ill, self-destructive, and dependent. The invocation of NHOMA, insight, is an act of independence, of maturity, for it establishes for the Afurakani male as well as the Afuraitkaitnit female the reality that his consciousness is directly connected to the divine consciousness of Inyamewa, Inyameo, Amenet, Amen. This means that there is no problem that cannot be solved. There is no obstacle that cannot be overcome. As Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut, we have the capacity to see the consequences of misguided ideas and change course. Number one, before we create a major problem or exacerbate an existing one. And number two, after we have found ourselves in a negative situation and are seeking a way out. So let's go back once again. The invocation of NHOMA, insight, meaning you align with your krawa, your soul, your divine consciousness. When you align with that force in nature in the head region, you align with your NHOMA, the eye of your krawa, your quote-unquote third eye, your Eni. And Akhan meaning eye, Eni meaning eye in ancient Kemet. The pituitary gland and the pineal gland and so forth, the physical seat, dealing with that. And of course, the pineal gland, the physical seat, is that light-sensitive gland dealing with that. The Akut, physical seat of the quote-unquote third eye, the intuition and all of that. When you attune to your Kra, you attune to the spiritual pineal, the Akut, and therefore you illuminate yourself internally. You attune to divine wisdom. You attune to the same drop of divine consciousness that's dwelling within you. There's a drop from the ocean of divine consciousness, which is the soul of the Supreme Being, the Ka and the Kai of the Supreme Being. So when you align with yours, you're also aligning with that great soul. It's like when you take a deep breath, you have a little pocket of air in your lungs, but the reason why it's vital is because it's connected via your trachea to the air outside of your body, which is the great source of air around the planet. So that great source of air, you draw in a little drop of it inside your lungs to animate yourself and enliven yourself and oxidate your blood and everything else. We have a portion, a drop of the divine consciousness, the divine Ka and Kai of the Supreme Being that dwells within our head region. When we align with that consciousness, we're aligning with divine consciousness. Therefore, we can attune to reality. And we can apply what we learn through that alignment process to, number one, overcome obstacles before we create a major problem or exacerbate an existing one. And number two, after we have found ourselves in a negative situation and are seeking a way out. Nhumu, or insight, gives the Afurakani OBARIMA, man as well as woman, the capacity to quote-unquote rescue himself or herself before something negative has a chance to take shape. That's one example. That's one aspect of it. You can have intuition about walking down a certain block at a certain time. Your intuition or your ehunhum, as we say in Akhan, or ekut, who said in ancient Kemet, directs you to change course, to take a different path on that destination. Later that evening, the individual learns that there was a fatal shooting on the block that he was directed by his nhumu, his insight, not to walk down. Such an example demonstrates that the Afurakani individual has the responsibility to awaken his or her nhumu, insight, his divine perception, ohu, knowledge, perception, inherited from Nyamewa, Nyame, the Supreme Being, through his OKRA. It is an act of maturity. So it's not an option. It is our obligation. It is an act of maturity to cultivate the capacity to align with your Kra on a consistent basis so you can access your nhumu, access your insight, access that divine intuition. So you can align your thoughts, intentions, and actions with order. So you can see things unfolding before they unfold and make proper decisions to avoid negative consequences. That is your obligation. That's your responsibility as an adult. It is an act of maturity. It is incumbent upon the Afurakani male and female to be able to perceive the dangers around the corner, large and small, physically, emotionally, culturally, politically, economically, spiritually, and take preventative measures. In the same fashion, the Afurakani OBARIMA, male as well as female, must be able to invoke his or her nhumu, insight, when others in the community have failed to do so. When societal problems plague the community and the community has not moved to solve the problem, it is incumbent upon the mature Afurakanu, Afuraitkaitnut, to engage in intervention, to invoke their nhumu, insight, in order to perceive the underlying causes of the problem and eradicate them completely, finally restoring balance to Allah. This is why we must lay out this cosmology first. This is why we must lay out this culture first so we can understand the structural components of these problems, how they unfold, how they develop, so we can get to lasting, real solutions and not misdiagnosing the problem and creating foolish consequences from misguided applications of pseudo-remedy to these problems. Ohum in the Akhan, meaning knowledge, perception, and nhumu are messengers of Nokwade, messengers of truth. When the Afurakani, within the Afurakani OBARIMA, man, it is our adherence to Nokwade, truth, through nhumu, insight, that will solve our inherited, present, and future potential problems. For nhumu, or insight, attunes us to the reality of Maranechi, divine law and divine hate, the two poles of divine order. Through divine law and divine hate, we learn who and what to accept, meaning to be in law or be in love with, and who and what to hate, to reject. Nhumu, insight, from the Kra, divine alignment with perception, leads to proper judgment. The Afurakani OBARIMA recognizes the reality that judgment is wise. Only misjudgment is unwise. Proper judgment is the hallmark of maturity. The perversion or suppression of nhumu, insight, sets us up to be dominated by the perverse views, beliefs of our enemies. When we lack nhumu, insight, vision, we lose direction. We then make misjudgment. This is blindness in the true sense. The whites and their offspring understood this reality and therefore moved to blind us to Nokwada. This resulted in the misdirection of the immature amongst us, generation after generation. The greatest means by which we have been misdirected into blindness is via the corruption of the whites and their offspring of our Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit ancestral religion. So recall that we say earlier in the book that darkness is natural. Blindness is a perversion. And when you don't align with your Kra, then you can align with the I of the Okra, which is your illumination, your intuition. When you can align with that, then you can align with Nokwale, with truth. When you can align with truth, then you become blind, which is a perversion. And then you succumb to the beliefs or views or perceptions of the enemy. And once you embrace those beliefs, views, and perceptions, then you begin to engage in self-destructive behavior. It becomes a self-perpetuating cycle fueled by the whites and their offspring. So before we move forward, there are a couple of minutes left in the online version of the broadcast. If you want to continue to listen beyond 11 o'clock, you must call in to get on the phone, because at 11 o'clock in a couple of minutes, if you're just listening online, it will cut off, but everybody who's on the phone by that time will still be able to hear. The phone line, the number is 657-383-0635, 657-383-0635. You have about 2 minutes to call in, 657-383-0635. Okay. So, and again, if anybody has a question or a comment, just hit the number 1 on the phone line. And also you can comment if you have logged in with a username into the chat room. You can comment and interact in the chat room if you have a username. All right. So the final section here, dealing with this aspect of governance, and we're showing the connection between that NHOMA, insight, self-governance, how it leads to the governance of the society. And Afurakani OBARIMA exercises NHOMA, insight, which instantly awakens him to the reality that the Afurakani Ancestral Religion is the only religion that has ever existed and that ever will exist, is through the ritual practices of our Nananom Nsamampo, spiritually cultivated ancestresses and ancestors, that we incorporate divine law. And it is through these ritual practices that we exercise divine hate, thereby restoring divine balance to our lives. So that's the key piece with regard to that. So we just want to go back to that specific section. Oku, which is knowledge or perception, and NHOMA, insight, are messengers of Nokwale, messengers of truth, within the Afurakani male and Afurakani female. It is our adherence to Nokwale, truth, through NHOMA, through insight, that will solve our inherited, present, and future potential problems. For NHOMA, or insight, attunes us to the reality of Madanachi, divine law and divine hate. Through law, we incorporate those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to incorporate to harmonize our thoughts, intentions, and actions with divine order. Through divine hate, we reject those things, objects, deeds, and entities we need to reject in order to restore balance to our thoughts, intentions, and actions, and to preserve ourselves in harmony with divine order. This is why we say the reality is recognized that judgment is wise, only misjudgment is unwise. Proper judgment is the hallmark of maturity. So when you recognize that reality, proper judgment is the hallmark of maturity. That's talking about self-governance. And when you begin to embrace self-governance as a mature Afurakani male, a mature Afurakani female, and you engage that on a regular basis through ritual practice, you cultivate that capacity to align with your Kra, align with your NHOMA, align with your insight. Then you align with truth, Nokwale, then you can make proper judgments. And when you make proper judgments, then you can make proper assessment of the problems that exist, that have been left unresolved, that must be resolved, or else we would continue to be in a dependent and stagnant state. But then also things that are coming up, things that are around the corner. You can begin to anticipate what's taking place, what's unfolding, what's taking shape, because you attune to your NHOMA, you attune to the Aku, that spiritual force within your so-called pineal gland, the eye of the Kra, the eye of the Krawa, the eye of the soul, divine consciousness, your intuition, aligning with the divine consciousness, and then applying the knowledge you gain from that to specific situations in life. That is what we call wisdom, the application of that divine knowledge coming from divine consciousness. When we do these things, we make proper assessments, judgments, so therefore we can, again, see what's coming up, what's unfolding, what's taking shape, not only in the very near future, right around the corner, but things unfolding days in advance. The Nsamanfo, the Abosom, will share with us the kinds of movements that other individuals and entities are making and how their behavior is unfolding and what they plan to do, and we can make adjustments to what we're doing to make sure we don't get caught up in a negative situation. So we can see what's coming up and we can prevent negative consequences. At the same time, if we find ourselves in negative situations, we can engage in the kind of intervention rooted in Nokwade, rooted in truth, powered by our alignment with our Kra, our soul divine consciousness, and therefore alignment with truth, so that we can make proper assessments, make proper judgments, establish plans of operation, and move forward to resolve these issues for good. That is self-governance. And that self-governance expands to the nation, expands to the Oman, expands to that entity, that living entity. So these are the cosmological foundations for ABAN, for government, the nature of government in Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit, Ancestral Culture. Now, of course, you will have governmental structures that manifest these different principles. Different ancestral groups, different Afurakani, Afuraitkaitnit ethnic groups have their own governmental structures rooted, number one, first and foremost, in the family, then the family blood circle, the patriclan and matriclan blood circles, the abosom that govern the patriclan and matriclan blood circles, inform the manner in which people engage in certain activities, what things are societally taboo for a certain group that are different for another group. There are social taboos, there are dietary taboos, there are ritual taboos, and so forth, based on a true history of what has taken place within your clan. If your clan migrated to a region, ate certain foods, and became allergic to certain foods, and everybody in the clan is allergic to that, then that is a dietary taboo for your clan. If somebody from another clan shows up and they don't have that problem, they can eat those foods all day long. But in your clan, you can't eat those foods. And if they don't know that, they'll say, well, hey, you can eat this. We eat it. It's perfectly fine. And you say, well, listen, we have an ancestral taboo with regard to that. Because of what's taken place over hundreds of years, what has developed within us with regard to our genetics, we can't consume this particular food because it will create disorder within us. The same thing is taking place with regard to behavior, certain kinds of behavior, certain modes of dealing with certain kinds of situations. Because of what happened historically over generations, there are certain things that are socially taboo. Maybe there's certain kinds of expressions of ritual song or ritual dance that certain groups do, and other groups, they have to do it in a different way to get to the same result. Because otherwise, if they do it the same way another clan does it, they take in energy in a manner that is destructive and discordant to them. So we must understand clan affiliation, patriclan and matriclan, governed by certain abosom, specific taboos or so-called laws, restrictions, and so forth, are born of that identity, who you actually are. And then the government of the people is born of who the people actually are. So when we know who we are spiritually, we know what abosom govern us, what these taboos are connected to, what animals are totems and so forth are connected to us, and plant life and mineral life, then you understand how to interact with plant life in the region that you're at, mineral life in that region, with one another based on different clans and so forth. You begin to establish a government based on this kind of knowledge, this innate, intrinsic kind of knowledge, this intricate kind of knowledge. If you just have a cookie cutter governmental structure that everybody's supposed to fit into, irregardless of the kind of clan they come from, irregardless of their spiritual disposition, then you have something akin to what the whites and offspring put forward, where a small group of people are in control and everybody else is under that control. This is not the kind of governmental structure that we deal with. So everything is born out of the family, their clans, then the heads of clans, the heads of matriclans and patriclans, based on their maturity, are elevated to sitting in seats of authority. They're the head of the patriclans and matriclans in the different villages, all come together to represent council that informs the king and the queen mother. And of course, this is where you get this whole notion of presidents and governors, and then they have legislatures and so forth, and you have rulers in the Senate like in ancient Rome, so-called ancient Rome and so forth. All these things are born out of the way we structured our societies, but it goes all the way back to our identity, spiritually, then through specific blood circles, then through collectives, then through larger collectives, and later governmental structure. So that's later though. The key is when we were talking about the whole notion of Nut, talking about the differences between ritual purification and cultural purification, what is on the surface in the seen world, what is in the unseen world, the representatives of the abosom, the forces of nature in the seen world are the healers and healers. The representatives of the ancestresses and ancestors in the seen world are the spiritually cultivated elders and eldresses. When they engage their responsibilities in a harmonious fashion, then they begin to regulate order within society. And this is the basis of ABAN, the basis of government. So this is what we want to lay out tonight. So let's saw a couple of comments in the chat room. Want to make sure we didn't miss anything. So that was okay. And Medase, we appreciate that comment in the chat room. Okay. All right. So that was the only couple of comments that we saw. So we can end it here. We just want to remind the people who came in a little bit later. Check out our recently launched initiative, and we'll put the link in the chat room right now. What we did on Friday, Ptah, and let's just put the link in here right now. The OBARIMA link. We were just reading from a section of the OBARIMA book, Afurakani Manhood. Yes, we will have, people have asked, OBARIMA, Afuraitkaitnit Womanhood book. We plan to release that this year before September, because our new year begins in September. So before September, we should have that book released. But we started our Afurakani Manhood training initiative. We've been doing these workshops, free workshops for Afurakani young men and adults since 2008, so-called 2008, since we published this book. But even prior to that, we were doing the same workshops. We just didn't have the book published at that point. But we started doing these workshops dealing with OBARIMA going back to 13,003, so-called 2003. So, but once we release the book and we do the workshops, everybody in the workshop receives a free copy of the softcover book. We also have the Odwirafo distributor option where people can become employed immediately. If an Afurakani man or a woman if you need work, you want to generate income for yourself, we have the distributor option so you can become a distributor independently as entrepreneurs, working for yourself. You wouldn't be working for us, but working for yourself, purchasing the books wholesale and selling the softcover books retail. And therefore, we have 16 different books, including OBARIMA. That Odwirafo option, that distributor option is up and running as we speak, and we have some people who are already engaged in that process. Part of the fundraising initiative is to expand these workshops so that we can expand them across the country, number one. Number two, to get the softcover version of the OBARIMA Afurakani Manhood book in the hands of every Afurakani male in the country. That's the goal, of course. We've started that process by making all of our books, including OBARIMA, the ebook version, a free download. So every black person in America, as well as around the world, who has access to the internet through a smartphone or anything else, they do have access to this book. We always get positive feedback over the course of the number of years that we have published the book, where people have read the book one time and their lives have been transformed. They've transformed their behavior, their character. They have a set of 7 principles connected to the 7 days of the week, governed by the abosom that govern these 7 days of the week, where they can focus on a refining of their character and focus every single day of the week based on the energy of the day. They have their own manual for manhood. Young men, so-called at risk, lost, quote-unquote, in society, We've transformed the minds of these individuals in one workshop and one reading of the book, one listening to of the, video series that we did on the book for those who haven't been able to attend a workshop and so forth, transforming them right where they are right now. We just want to expand this process to reach as many of our people physically in person as possible. We also have individuals who have gone through these workshops, studied this information, and now they are teaching this information to young black males in groups, as well as older black males in groups all across the country, in schools, home schools, people who are human services agents going into jails and so forth, dealing with people who, were incarcerated for nonviolent offenses and so forth. Just a number of different developments, positive developments based on the publication. And we want to expand that work, expand the entrepreneurship opportunities. Of course, there's a high percentage of our people unemployed. We have a method by which they can employ themselves immediately. Sometimes they don't have the funds up front to purchase the books wholesale so they can begin to sell them retail. Your contribution to our GoFundMe campaign allows us to give them the books up front, and then they can begin to sell and become employed instantaneously. Most people talking about culture and everything else, when it comes to somebody saying, well, can you assist me through your culture with gaining employment or becoming an entrepreneur, they have nothing for them except a speech or a presentation. But we have something in place already that people are already utilizing and have been utilizing to employ themselves and generate income and support their families and so forth. So we would like to expand that. And of course, we'd like to get the book into the hands of every Afurakani male. Just like the Whites Now Spring will give away free Bibles and Qurans to people all across the country and all the jails and everywhere else, we need to get real books with real information into the hands of our people, as many as possible. And we'd like to give away as many free copies of the softcover version whenever we can to any Afurakani male whenever we can. So again, yet I say to those who have contributed already, just go to the OBARIMA page on our website. We also created an OBARIMA page on Facebook as well to, talk about the information. And please share the information. Yet I say we thank you for tuning in to the show. And Yebeshi Abia, we will meet again. That's it.